Hello. Welcome to another episode of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a love for scary movies. Each week we both watch the same movie on our own and then record a conversation together about what we liked, what we hated, if we were scared, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. This season we're going to be focusing on horror subgenres and how they've changed over time. Hope you enjoy it, and thanks for listening. So I'm just going to set the tone by saying this movie did suck. But I maintain that it did some really notable things as far as how it exists within the genre of haunted house horror movies.
Okay.
And what I think is really cool about this season and how we're doing these kind of mini deep dives into different horror subgenres is that it is getting us in the headspace to be able to appreciate things about movies that we probably would just write off and stop paying attention to in the past.
Right. For me, my beef with this is how they spelled the name of the damn movie.
Oh, we will get into that, my friend.
I was so mad. Dude, I wrote a piece, like basically taking it out on Real Good, thinking I rented something I didn't need to. So,
yeah.
But then I was like, oh no, it's the movie's fault.
Yeah. Do you know what I ended up doing to find this on Real Good?
What?
I typed in star space ghosts.
You used, I can't believe that.
And it worked.
That works every, our systems are plus signs. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dang.
But yeah, this...
Dude, you're good, bro. You're smart.
Yeah, I work on the other side of this all day, every day. Yeah. I get to use it for my own benefit occasionally, but yeah. So anyway, we'll get into all that. So this movie is called 13 Ghosts. It very much embraced like the early 2000s, put a number in the title instead of a letter. So you think of like Layer Cake or Lucky Number 11, like that was a thing at the time.
Yeah.
This one is 13 Ghosts, but they did it wrong because they don't know standard number letter substitution.
Mm-hmm.
So really, what they've spelled here is Thir13en ghosts.
Yeah, is it called Leet?
Yeah, well, Leet is where, kind of the standard for how you would.
That's what I was thinking. I was so thrown off from this because I was like, why didn't you just do a 1 on the first I and then a 3 on the E?
Well, the T should be a 7 if they want to do this right. But anyway, they were going for the aesthetic of it, not the readability or the searchability, which granted in 2001 was way less of a concern. So, we don't always predict the future correctly. This movie definitely didn't. But yeah, we'll get into more detail.
I love it.
Okay, quick reset. We are still working our way through season the 13th. For this season, we're doing a collection of miniseries on different horror subgenres and how they've evolved and changed over time. We started with zombie movies and then worked our way through slashers, and now we're toward the end of a run on haunted house movies. So far, we've talked about The House of the Devil, which is arguably the first horror movie ever made. It was a short from the 1890s. Then we watched The House on Haunted Hill, The Amityville Horror, and Ghostwatch. So now this week, we're going to talk about the movie Thir13en Ghosts, more properly titled 13 Ghosts.
Love it.
Did you, vividly remember this movie poster as soon as you saw it?
Yeah, but I figured out why.
Okay, I was going to ask why, because I had the same reaction and Sarah had the same reaction, but we had never seen it and we'd never heard anybody talk about it. So what's your theory?
Well, just because, in the past year and a half, I have from basically 8 until I go to sleep to myself. And so I'm on, HBO Max or whatever, I have a movie going, doing whatever I'm doing. This has been available on 1,000 different streaming services. Mm-hmm. And I've seen that so many times. I've read
it's just
about
popping up in our recs.
That was it. That's how I remembered it. Gotcha. I was like, I just saw this on, whatever Prime or whatever it was. And that's just that's why I thought, but I also, while watching, felt like I'd seen it before, but I didn't know if it was just an episode of Monk that went bad or not. So,
right.
That's legit, too.
I was going to call it the worst Psycho sequel.
Yeah.
or not Psycho. Gosh,
Psych.
I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
Scream, the worst Scream sequel. Yeah, in which Matthew Lillard continues to find himself in trouble. So yeah. But anyway, yeah, this one showed up on a lot of lists of like most creative or most interesting haunted house movies. I don't think it's probably on very many lists of best haunted house movies.
Yeah, that I will say it's definitely creative for sure. Yeah. Without a doubt.
Yeah, and the thing that really stood out to me about it is it really did do a lot of things. Like, it was very much a haunted house movie, but it didn't follow the vast majority of like the tropes around haunted house movies. And so that's what made it interesting to me and why I'm glad that we did it. But before we get into that, I'm going to do the intro, and then I'm going to assume you don't have any fun facts because there's very little information on the internet about this movie because no one watched it or liked it.
Mm-hmm.
But then we will get into the future-seeking, deal with the devil device details.
Dude, if I had a camera on me, I was nodding in support that whole time. I loved it. Not your best, but one of.
I felt like I had to reach after kind of coming up short last week.
I couldn't even tell. Oh, yeah. It was great. Yeah. Okay. It was bad last week, though.
I know. In 2001, Warner Brothers Pictures brought us 13 Ghosts, a paranormal horror thriller remake of the 1960 movie of the same name. 13 Ghosts tells the story of an impoverished widower and his 2 kids who inherit a large house from his deceased uncle. As it turns out, his uncle was an avid ghost hunter, and there's much more to the house than meets the eye. This movie was made on a budget of $42 million and made about $68 million at the box office. It can currently be rented for streaming on Amazon Prime Video. Please don't buy this one. So I said that this one didn't really fall into many of the kind of standard tropes of haunted house movies, but it did definitely have like a classic horror movie intro.
Oh, yeah. Where you start off super confused.
Well, we got like a good first, like super intense, gory opening scene, after which it kind of like dropped back down to like be a little calmer and make you care about the characters. But I thought the opening scene here, where you had all the people in like the junkyard who were on like the ghost hunt, and it seemed like they were very like well equipped and high budget and like knew what they were doing. And so when the ghost just kind of like turned the tables and just started ripping people apart, I liked it.
It's nice when the ghosts do the stuff that you want to do, you know?
Yeah.
I was kidding. Yeah. I think it's super. I'd still stand by that the story is very unique. That's the one piece that I don't think can be taken from it.
Yeah, and I feel like this one, like typically when we've watched haunted house movies, the main thing for most of the movie is like sort of that growing sense of dread or suspense, where you're not really completely sure what's going on. You don't really know like what the potential consequences are, and you don't really know like what the real reason behind the weird occurrences is, and that's a thing that like gets slowly unveiled over time. I feel like this movie took the totally opposite route. I feel like it was just like, all right, we're throwing this thing in drive and going 0 to 60, and it's really, really, for the most part, felt more like an action or thriller movie than it did like a psychological suspense type movie.
Yeah. And I was wondering, I was trying to figure out why, because I had the same thought. And I think it's just a 2000s thing, man. That was the only thing I could kind of come up with.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Like I feel like, yeah, you could probably point to a lot of those early 2000s horror movies, like some of the slasher remakes and stuff.
Yeah.
And they definitely kind of had more of that like action vibe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was the only thing I was like, what the heck is like, why does it feel like this? It was like a combo of like recorded by Are You Afraid of the Dark and the producers of Are You Afraid of the Dark and like Michael Bay. That's what I thought. I was just like, what is going on in this world?
Yeah, with all the like mechanical stuff sliding around inside the house. Like, no, definitely. I see that 100%.
Yeah. It's like, I don't hate it, but come on.
Yeah. No, it was just I guess the overall story was you had this guy named Cyrus, and he was out catching ghosts with the assistance of Matthew Lillard's character, who was like a psychic kind of. And then he had all those ghosts in the basement of his house. Then he died on a ghost hunt. Then Monk and his family inherit the house. And the night that they go to like see it for the first time, they basically get locked inside. All the ghosts get set free. And you eventually find out that there's this machine in the basement that is this tool that was built from the specifications of a guy who wrote down how to build it while he was demonically possessed or something, and it's supposed to give you all the power to see the past and the present and the future. And then you find out that the guy who built it didn't really die, and he was trying to trick Monk into sacrificing himself, because that was like the key to getting this thing to work alongside the different types of ghosts you had to collect. And it was very convoluted, but that was kind of the overall story arc, which is very, very different than the overall story arc of any of the haunted house movies we've watched so far, which have generally been like, you have a house, bad stuff happened in that house, someone new comes into the house and can't leave for some reason, and over time they experience more and more intense paranormal happenings. And so what was really interesting to me is that in the past, it was like the haunting was very much tied to the place. Like the house itself was like intrinsically creepy because of its history and how it had become like one with these sort of evil forces, right? But here, the ghosts were imported. Like the house was really just kind of a bystander in all of it.
No, that's really true. And I think that's one of the reasons why I was thinking the uniqueness of it. Like, there were a few things throughout that I think was a little bit different than the typical haunted house that you would see. Like it took a while to kind of get what I would just call, just for the sake of lack of better words, I guess, but like the Conjuring effect of like, I feel like 90% of the Conjuring, like when you get the scenes when they're going outside, you get your breath because it's less stressful because you're not in the house. Yeah. And this, I felt like that a couple times, but it wasn't as much, but it's still categorized for me as a haunted house horror movie. If that, what I just said makes any sense.
No, I agree with you completely in that I can make no arguments that this wasn't a haunted house movie, but it is just a super unique one compared to everything else that we've seen, either like ones that we've talked about or have just seen in the past.
Which, like which I love the idea of like trying to change it up. Yeah, for sure. I think when it kind of falls at the production kind of quality, maybe that's when it kind of hurts it. But the other thing too, would this movie got a pass if it was like from the 80s opposed to the 2000s? Because in 2000s, we're very aware of what normal TV and movies was like during that time. That was when our time we were watching it the most, I feel like. And so it's like we know how to compare it to others, but there was something late 90s, early 2000s that was just like, a lot of the music was terrible. A lot of the movies were terrible. A lot of acting. Yes. Yeah. It was just like the height of like just throwing shit out there kind of thing, right. But
yeah, no, definitely. And I think that's a really interesting idea, was like, if we watch this movie with the same attitude as we watch like Return of the Living Dead, does it really stand out as that bad? Or is it just kind of a weird because we're judging it against other movies from the time? Like this came out within like a year of 28 Days Later. So are we just like biased, kind of by our expectations from that time?
Yeah.
I think I still wouldn't have liked this movie. I think there were things about it that would have annoyed me regardless.
Yeah. And I think, based off the ratings on a lot of the sites, I think that's pretty the standard.
Other 10 people that saw it felt the same. Yeah. But no, it was weird hearing Monk say shit.
I was thinking the same thing. It was also, I was like, it's weird to see him not play Monk. And I hate that's like associated to him, but that's not an insult. Like, he was very good at Monk. Like, that just worked out very well. It just fit him, I felt like. So
did you know Monk was on for 8 seasons?
No,
Yeah. He was a
really.
very successful monk. So I don't
He
think
didn't
you
have
feel
to
bad
do
at
this
all.
movie. He didn't have to. He did
Well,
it.
this was before. So
When did Monk come out?
like the year after. Yeah.
This is what got him the movie. They're like, hey, man, we feel bad.
Yeah.
My bad. We got you in a bad situation. Here's a TV show that should work.
Excuse me, sir. You deserve better.
Yeah.
Some other things that we've been talking about with these haunted house movies that we're watching are sort of the questions that need to be answered. And one of those questions is like, why are the people stuck there? So a lot of times that's like a thing that the director has to solve. And it's like, oh, okay, why don't the people just leave? They're in a physical place that is haunted. They become increasingly aware that they're in danger. And yet for the movie to continue, they somehow have to remain there in a believable way. And some movies are better at like establishing that than others. Like sometimes it's like, well, it'd be kind of expensive to move, so I guess we'll just stay here and let our kids get tortured. Like that's not realistic to me. But with this one, they were just like, yeah, no, the doors just shut and locked behind us as soon as we came inside, and then it was all haunting from there until the end. So I do like that I didn't have to spend any time like wondering if I would have left at that point, because they had no point at which they could have left.
Yeah. That was a pretty easy one as far as why they were staying and why they got there as well. Financial woes, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Another thing we've been talking about is like, what is the source of the danger and how are the people affected? In this one, the source of the danger was kind of twofold. It was the ghosts, the dangerous ghosts that the Uncle Cyrus had captured and brought to the house. But then it was also kind of his larger plot.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way that he was trying to trick them into activating the machine that would give him all the power.
Right.
And so that was kind of an interesting twist in that it wasn't like you just know up front kind of everything that's going to go on. But I also don't think that they pulled off like the story or that twist super well. Like it just felt kind of clunky and convoluted. But the idea that the ghosts were all super dangerous in their own way, I found interesting.
Yeah. I was actually fixed to say I think it was like 3 pieces, but I feel like my third one would have been like the house itself, as far as like the danger goes.
The way it kept like opening and closing and stuff.
Yeah, and like you know, shutting glass and killing people. But that's part of like Cyrus's thing. So yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it was definitely twofold there.
Yeah,
and like I think I would have just like walked in and saw like a whole house of glass and be like, well, this isn't. Like I wouldn't have been locked in because I was like, well, this is dumb.
Right. Yeah. But at the same time, if the other option was like a 400 square foot apartment, it's like, well,
did they ever?
I can deal with the natural light.
Yeah.
So.
Did they ever say where they got those glasses from?
They didn't say it. They just explained what they were. So they were just sort of were all over the house for some reason. But I did want to bring that up because the other question we've kind of been asking is like, what techniques is the director using to create fear and how is that interesting or unique compared to other movies? And I feel like a big part of this one was what you could see versus what you couldn't see and what the characters could see versus what they couldn't see.
Right.
So one thing that really stood out to me and that I made a note of in the very opening scene was how I thought it was awesome that the ghost would just like randomly appear and disappear, but its actions were always still happening. So when you couldn't see the ghost, it wasn't that he wasn't still dangerous. It was just you couldn't see what he was about to do. And then the way that he was just like bending those people in half and like completely wrecking shop.
Yeah.
With him like occasionally showing up in the middle of it, I thought was just a really cool way of presenting that scene.
Yeah. That's true, because there was definitely a scene with I think her name was Maggie, the babysitter helper, even though they didn't have any money. I don't know how that worked out. Anyway, I think it was between her and Matthew Lillard's character, and like she has him on and she's seeing like the ghost for the first time, and like he's kind of explaining it, and he's like face to face with the glass, but he doesn't have the glasses on, and like he's not scared, but you see like she's petrified, you know, kind of thing. So like that's definitely how they use that. Like you could see like the fear that she had and like that he did. So that's the tool that tells me that's the tool that they were using specifically.
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the things that we've talked about is kind of like absolutely core to making a haunted house movie work is this technique that they've stumbled upon, over 100 years ago, that when you as the viewer see the character on the screen in danger, but they don't know it yet, that creates this like sense of like empathy and dread in you that is very like grabbing. And so I think that's kind of a key part of any haunted house movie and kind of how it builds that tension or feeling of discomfort in the viewers, which is kind of ultimately like the goal of horror movies in one way or another.
Yeah. Yeah. And I did read where they were messing with the viewers with audio as well with this, which I could see because I felt like this, like, I'm surprised that you hadn't mentioned, like, was the audio like quiet or off? Because like it was for me, I was turning up and down the whole time, and then I read that they were trying to fart around with that, and I was like, gosh, don't mess with the mastering. Come on.
Yeah, and I know I said earlier that generally this didn't follow most of the tropes of normal haunted house movies, but one thing that it did do was like the outside shots of the house at night. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like we should at this point just call that a requirement. Like if you're not doing that, is it really even a haunted house movie?
Yeah, which, makes sense. You got to show what you're trying to. I guess if you never show it, how do you know? It could be a haunted apartment. Ugh.
Ugh. Yeah.
Gross.
Yeah, just the idea of moving back into an apartment after spending the first 8 months of COVID there is scary enough to me on its own.
That's a good point.
Yeah, but terrible upstairs neighbors with a rowing machine, and then they were also doing construction on the outside of the building at the time.
Like we would be recording and I could hear them.
Oh God, it was so bad.
Yeah, I don't know how you have patience with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Turns out you didn't have upstairs neighbors though.
Wouldn't that have been a twist?
It would have been.
I always kind of hoped it would play out that way, but yeah.
It would have been dope, man. I'm excited. I actually just kind of started smiling about it.
Yeah. But anyway, yeah, so I guess one other thing that I alluded to a little bit earlier was the idea of the ghosts in this one and how they all had kind of like unique personalities. And I think that's different than what we've seen in the past too, in that it was like 12 different ghosts that were all meant to be scary in like slightly different ways and were different levels of malevolent. And so as the people were going through the house, they would have these like random encounters with what could be any of these 12 ghosts, which could be any level of danger associated. And I think that that's kind of an interesting thing to do psychologically, because the characters don't know ahead of time like which ones are more dangerous and which ones aren't. And they were all very like visually distinct. So you as the viewer, like I said, as the ghosts are visible or not visible, are all of a sudden confronted with one and trying to like figure out in the moment, is this a thing that's about to do something bad, or is this character going to be okay? And that was just kind of a way of making it unsteady, I guess, as you're going through the experience.
Yeah. I guess I don't necessarily have anything to add to it. I think for me, that is a very professional way of looking at this movie, where my unprofessionalness was just like, once I was done with it, I was just done. Like I was struggling to try to come up with answers to our questions because I was just like, God dang it, come on.
Yeah, I mean, I did set the tone in the beginning. This movie did suck.
Yeah,
it's worth talking about.
Yeah. That was I think that was the difficult part, because I, on record last week, was just talking about how like I think this is my favorite genre.
Yeah.
One of, and then this movie came out. I was like, oh, if this movie came sooner.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Start to rethink some things.
Yeah, I think that like overall with it, like I think they had a cool idea, an idea that could have like kind of changed the game a little bit, or at least maybe turned into 14 ghosts and then 15 ghosts or something, something like that.
Right, right.
But it to me, my perception of this was just like, I think it seemed like they had a good idea. Someone had a really cool idea for a film, and maybe like the studio got in and it was like, nah, you can't do half the stuff or whatever. Like it just seemed like it was like partially complete ideas or something. I don't know.
Well, yeah, the kind of the grand reveal of the overarching storyline felt very rushed to me, to the point that it didn't really land that well.
Yeah.
And maybe that was, they used up more budget than they expected in the beginning, or the editing had to take out a bunch of stuff to get it down to the time that the studio wanted or whatever. But yeah, I feel like the best way I can think of to describe this movie is that if you look at the Wikipedia page, apparently when you bought it on DVD, there was like an additional like booklet or like other special feature or something that explained the background of all the different ghosts. And on the Wikipedia page, that takes up more space and characters than all of the rest of the description of the movie.
Yeah, dude, you should be proud of me because one of my facts was gonna be the definition of that, and I was just like, you know what? Nah, not worth it.
Yeah.
But no, you're absolutely right. It's literally 2/3 of the page.
Yeah, and
where
so
the other third is just the complaints about it.
Yeah, but that's the thing that I feel like is such a good summary for this movie, because it's like the ideas contained in this movie are just so much better than the movie itself. And I really can't point at another haunted house movie where I'm like, oh yeah, this stole this idea from that one. It really feels like kind of a unique standalone thing to me. And so my question for anyone out there who's seen this movie and is listening, please email us at thehorrificpod@gmail.com and let us know other movies that you think inspired or influenced this one. Because I'm really interested in knowing, was this truly like this unique of an idea and a story and a way of taking this subgenre and then like freshening it up for the modern world and injecting all these elements that made it feel totally different? Or are there just some movies that we haven't talked about or haven't seen yet that really are just like, oh yeah, it's just derivative, they ripped off, insert the name of another movie?
The guy who directed this one also directed Ghost Ship. That wasn't bad, but it reminded me of it. So maybe that's where we got the feeling of where we've seen it before. Because it did, I feel like it had not the same storyline or anything, but it's the same vibe, like darkness, scenery. Yeah. Hey, listen, they're not all winners. And if this is your favorite, that's okay. Like, it's 100% okay. Like, I know I like things that other people don't. Just don't give a shit what other people think. Do you know what I mean? It works.
Yeah.
I'm just giving out life advice for free.
Yeah.
Ugh. I did like how they showed the ghost side of things in this film. There's one scene where the daughter was like in the bathroom getting ready and the ghost was like right behind her and she couldn't see him because she didn't have glasses on, and the whole bathroom was like all white and bloody and stuff, so you saw the ghost's perspective and then you saw her perspective, and I was like, that's cool. That was just my thought.
The overhead shot where it spelled out like "I'm sorry" in like something red on the floor, that was one of two scenes that stood out to me as outstanding in this movie. And it's totally uncharacteristic of the rest of it, but there was that scene and that overhead shot, and just that was perfect.
Yeah.
The other was in the beginning when you were first introduced to Monk's family, and the way that they told the story of him having the happy family, and then the fire killing his wife, and then them, missing bills and the stress and the poverty and everything else going on, and the way that they just panned the camera around like one room, and everything went from like really bright and warm to kind of like more old and dirty and decayed and stuff. And then we're playing the audio along with it. I thought that was just extremely well done and such a good way of communicating what they needed to set up the story without wasting a bunch of time and bad acting on it.
Agreed. Because it was once they got to the house that they inherited, the conversation that happened with Matthew and the lawyer, the guy who was in on it, like that's where I started getting irritated, because I was like, first off, like this is not a normal, like this is not real. Right. Like this is not a normal situation that would happen. So
they're definitely going for some like weird, quirky comic relief, and most of it is absolutely not working which is totally taking me out of the vibe of a horror movie.
So like when we came to this section of the season and we're talking about, you know, haunted houses and all this, like this is what we wanted to do, watch other haunted houses that weren't part of the norm. And you know, so we did that, and that's great. It didn't necessarily hit for me, and that's definitely okay. Like there were things in this that I could appreciate 100%, and I think that they did well, and the execution was great. But at the end of the day, like it's just not for me, and that's all right.
Yeah.
So that was one of my thoughts. Also, kind of tired of seeing kids that look like they could be like the wife of the dad. You know, like Shannon Elizabeth was like, I just thought she looked the same age as Monk. So
yes, age relativity is a thing that a lot of movies are bad at, and it throws me off.
Yeah, because even though like we have siblings that are almost a decade or, you know, a decade younger than us, but we still at this, you know, it's like you can tell. Yeah. You can tell that they're. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. That's my thoughts on the film. Just wasn't executed great. I'm sure they'll come out with a remake one day, but who knows?
Yeah, like I said, I'm not sorry that I've seen this movie because I thought it was a super interesting thing to talk about when we're comparing the way that haunted house movies have been pulled off over time. And I think it's really cool to watch this one, especially after seeing Ghost Watch, which I feel like was also a super unique experience.
Yep.
But again, yeah, it kind of fell short on the quality of the movie side, but definitely good for us to talk about kind of what we expect from haunted house movies. Yep. So next week, we're going to be back with our final entry in our mini run on haunted houses. And then after that, we're going to be back with something totally different.
We'll never tell you guys.
Just going to have to wait and see.
Ever.
/here. And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.